It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yesterday, we read for you a fantastic op-ed in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette about the importance of school choice, and now's the time to get it done, by Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. And I wanted to bring in now, we have Dr. Patrick Wolf is on the line. You've heard from Patrick before. He is a distinguished professor of education policy and a 21st century endowed chair in school choice in the Department of Education Reform at the University of Arkansas College of Education and Health Profession. Dr. Patrick Wolf, it's good to have you on again, sir.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. Did you read and were you encouraged by Lieutenant Governor's Tim Griffin's op-ed in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette? I mean, I thought it was really straightforward and really a challenge with an opportunity of things that we can get done.
Yeah, I thought it was a very strong piece. You know, it highlighted the fact that parents are first educators. They want and need to be in control of their child's education. And when they have more options, they have more of an ability to match their child to the school that's going to best meet their kids' needs.
So last night, the President of the United States, in his State of the Union address, he referenced school choice. This is something that when I first heard of it, it was a very bipartisan issue. Is it still a bipartisan issue, or is it less so at this point?
It's less so at the national level. There isn't much support from congressional Democrats for parental school choice, but at the state and local level, school choice always has been and continues to be generally a bipartisan issue with support from both sides of the aisle.
So, and that's fantastic. I think Arkansas has got a great chance. You know, right now we're in the middle of our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. 2 years ago, we weren't as successful. There was a plan. State Representative Jim Dotson had a bill, to allow some scholarships, some funds, allow for organizations to be charitable to fund these scholarships. But of course, we had some arguments from the status quo school district superintendents that they thought this was going to hurt them, and those are the arguments. Are those the arguments in other states? Because I know that you are you're a resource that people all across the country use for school choice.
Yeah, I mean, there are 54 programs in 30 states across the country. We have a small program here in Arkansas, the Succeed Scholarship Program, that's limited to students with moderate to severe disabilities. And so there's been a push. Jim Dotson and others have been pushing for expanding access to school choice for larger populations of families in Arkansas. So, I mean, everything is very predictable if you don't have school choice, right? I mean, every kid goes to their residentially zoned school. So that makes planning easy for people working in the public school system. But sometimes that creates a situation where a child just isn't getting what they need and parents aren't getting what they want from their schools because one size really doesn't fit all in a child's education. So, I mean, I think a lot of the pushback from the public school system is just, because it will disrupt their ability to predict, how many kids are coming and things like that.
Yeah, and that's going to make it hard to budget. Do you think any of it is taken personally sometimes?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I suppose, you want, but in choice environments I've studied, Paul, like Milwaukee. Milwaukee was where the original private school choice program was launched in 1990. When I went in there with my research team and evaluated that program and other school choice programs in Milwaukee, the superintendent came up to me and said, "We know school choice is here to stay. We want parents to choose our schools." So I thought that was a very healthy attitude by him, that everybody should go to the school they want, and I want them to want my schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great attitude. And I'm sure that there are some Arkansas superintendents, who believe the same way. I mean, I don't think anybody is willing to say that, our educational system, our public educational system is where it needs to be. We are getting, um, bad results in some cases. And then there, at the same time, there are really good schools out there as well. It just seems to me that anytime school choice is talked about, there seems to be like I don't know, a resistance. I mean, we don't even have teachers unions, in Arkansas, but it seems to me that there is a resistance to it because they think it's somehow going to be a negative thing on the public schools. But in reality, I think competition eventually is going to help everybody out.
And there's lots of research to support that, Paul. There have been 29 studies of what happens to the kids who stay in traditional public schools when private school choice is launched or expanded, and 28 out of the 29 find that their test scores go up. And they find that the schools communicate more effectively with parents when they face competition, that they launch new programs to meet the needs of students, and test scores go up. So, the families who stay in public schools, because those are working for them, they don't have anything to fear from choice. And I think ultimately, the people working in the public school system don't really have anything to fear from choice. It's change, and change is always a little frightening. But if they have an effective school, they're delivering results for parents. Those parents aren't going to leave.
So again, we're talking with Dr. Patrick Wolf, professor in 21st century, chair in school choice, professor of education at the University of Arkansas. So in your experience, when a state begins to adopt school choice, does it most of the time happen in increments? Are there any examples of a massive reform all at once? What typically happens?
Sure, that's a great question, Paul. Typically, like 3 to 5% of the eligible students participate in the first few years of a private school choice program, and then it grows kind of, modestly from there. Basically, parents have a certain wisdom. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if everything's going fine for their child in their neighborhood public school, they'll stay. But if it's not working out, that's where private school choice gives them new options that can really help their kids.
So it's really just more, I mean, when we say it just kind of is going to depend on the parents. I mean, if you give them the option, then it's going to be up to, are there a lot of underperforming schools? So, if there were a lot, then maybe you would assume that there might be more parents that are going to start taking advantage of the freedom that they have. One of the points that Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin made in his articles, how right now the status quo is something that we really would reject in any other aspect of our life. So if you could only go to the grocery stores that were in these, kind of arbitrary geographical boundaries, and maybe they're not arbitrary because, there's city boundaries, but, if you could only go to Walmart because it's the only one in your locale and you couldn't go to Kroger, we would reject that outright, but we accept it when it comes to the public education system. I thought that was a good point.
Yes, choice is a big part of our economy, of our society. It's valued as an American principle. And what's interesting, Paul, is in education, from pre-K all the way through college, we have consumer choice at the bookends, but not in the middle. So pre-K, parents have tons of choices for pre-K, and government supports whichever provider they select, even if it's a private or religious provider. And similarly, at the college level, students have a lot of choice, and government grants and loans support whatever institution they choose to go to, even if it's private or religious. It's just in the K-12 window where it seems to be controversial to have choices for what education organization is going to deliver that vital service to your child.
I never thought about it. On the bookends, you have choice, but in the middle, you don't have a choice. That is pretty fascinating. So yeah, I think if a lot of people kind of heard it phrased that way, maybe they would feel different. I definitely know with parents, more choice. Nobody's going to say no to more choice most of the time. I think those who are, the biggest problem that I had is I was covering this last year or 2 years ago when Arkansas was attempting to make some small reforms in this way. We did have a lot of people, teachers. My wife, is a teacher now. Well, now she's a stay-at-home mom, but they were hearing this stream of information that was starting at the top of their school district and going into the teachers' lounges. And they were coming out, and some of these people hadn't even actually read the bill, and some of the superintendents themselves hadn't read the bill, but they were just putting up this allergy, if you will, these defenses, saying we've got to stop this. And of course they were successful. And so I'm very optimistic this time. I hope that there are Republicans and Democrats alike that are going to say, you know what, we need to do something. We need to give people an opportunity, if they want it, to go to school where they want to go to school, in spite of their zip code.
Yeah, Paul, the polling shows that more than 2/3 of Arkansans support the idea of providing tax-funded scholarships for parents to customize their child's education through private tuition, tutoring, special ed therapies, and such. And that's the proposal that the advocates are putting together for this session. It has, widespread popular support in the state by voters, by residents, and we'll see if they can get it through the legislature.
Are there other instances across the country? Are there any instances where someone's tax dollars actually follow their child to what school they want to go to?
Not explicitly, not in the way you might want. I mean, there's a certain logic to that, right? Because we fund education for the kids, not for the buildings. So why wouldn't the money be, directly associated with the child? Now, it is kind of indirectly, because public schools are funded based on enrollment levels, previous year enrollment levels. But, there's a bit of a lag before that happens when a child switches schools. And also, nearly half of the funding for schools is outside of that foundational formula. So it's going to schools and school districts regardless of how many students they have. So you don't really quite have that idea of student-based funding where the money quickly and completely follows the child when they switch schools.
Well, the reason I wanted to ask that is because, now, personally, I think that would be a great idea. I think that would really be, competition and competing for customers, and the customers are the students. But you're saying that that's not really the case. That's not what a lot of these school choice reforms are attempting to do. They're attempting to do different things that, don't hurt the funding source necessarily of the existing schools. Is that correct?
Yes, they're all funded with separate appropriations. So there's it's like launching a new program. Now, eventually, they save the state money because the scholarships tend to be about half the amount that the state spends on a child when they attend a traditional public school. So in a sense, with some startup money from the state, there's a little bit of a cost to launch these programs, but then eventually, it catches up and they save money because they've got slightly lower enrollments in the more expensive traditional public schools because kids are going to the less expensive private schools.
Well, let's hope that the state of Arkansas, listens to your great advice, Dr. Patrick Wolf, and listens to the advice in that op-ed of the Lieutenant Governor, Tim Griffin, and hopefully we can make strides to give parents more choice, and that will directly benefit the students, which is what education is supposed to all be about, sir.
Oh, yes.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. It's great to talk to you again, Dr. Patrick Wolf.
My pleasure, Paul.
All righty. Folks, this interview will be up at conduitnews.com, and you can share it with your friends if you want to know more about school choice. Again, Patrick Wolf, a distinguished professor of education policy and 21st century endowed chair in school choice in the Department of Education Reform at the University of Arkansas. We're going to take a break and be back in just a moment.